Alright class, settle down, bell has rung. Let's get started on today's lecture. So we are here today for a core breakdown. Now these videos are where I take a ride line from the latest set, break down its key components, and we discuss it as a class. Now the line for today is going to be Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. And because of its close comparison, we are also going to be discussing the Dead Sea Spiritualist, Grave equals Zorga. So what we are going to do is we're going to look at both of the cards, discuss what they do, look at the ride lines that you can include for these cards, dive into their key cards, look at any tech options you want to use for the decks, and then we'll finish up with some example lists. So let's get started straight away with Chapter 1, which is Zorga's playstyle. So Zorga is all about the ability of Alchemagic, which is the fusing of an order from hand and the drop zone, combining their costs, and then combining their effects. The order you choose from the drop zone is bound throughout this process, but that is not so much of a downside with this deck, as you do have ways to abuse this. As for differences, to discuss the differences between the two different Zorgas, we first need to look at them. So we're going to start off by looking at Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. So Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga's got two skills. First one being, when you would play a normal order, you can Alchemagic it instead. And the second skill is act Vanguard Circle once a turn, Counterblast 1, choose a card from your drop zone, and call it to Rearguard Circle. And then the other Zorga is the Dead Sea Spiritualist, Grave equals Zorga. Now, Grave equals Zorga's got the skill of Continuous Vanguard Circle. If you did not Alchemagic this turn, all of your front row units get power plus 5,000. Then act Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost Soul Blast 1 and discard a card from your hand. Choose a normal order from your drop zone and put it into your hand. Until end of the turn, when you play a normal order, you may Alchemagic instead. So, as you can tell from here, there are some very big differences between the two different Zorgas. First one being the fact of, whereas Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga has the free Alchemagic, Dead Sea Spiritualist Grave equals Zorga relies more on a cost-based one, but gives you a more flexibility due to the fact that you're adding a order from drop zone back to hand. Then obviously Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga does have the recurring from the drop zone, so you can actually build more of a board up. But then Grave equals Zorga instead rewards you for doing the Alchemagic and gives your front row 5,000 power. So what we can discuss from this is the red Zorga, which is Dead Sea Spiritualist, Grave equals Zorga, is more focused around the aggression of the deck. It is a very aggro deck, giving power to your front row, consistently doing your Alchemagic every turn, trying to kill your opponent very fast. Whereas the Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga is more of a tempo-based Zorga. So you can control the pace, play to what you need, get key pieces onto the board to manipulate, and it becomes a very, as I said, tempo deck with a lot of control aspects behind it, which is really nice. So because of this, it does interest a lot of people because there is so much fluidity between the decks. Now it's time to move on to Chapter 2, which is the ride line discussions. And there is two main options I've seen people using for ride lines. First one is the more common one of Ranker Chain into Black Tear's Husk Dragon. The more uncommon one that you do see from people sometimes is Awakening from Slumber Rower into the World 3000 Years Later Rower. Now there is one big difference here, is the fact of the World 3000 Years Later Rower isn't actually restricted to needing the Awakening from Slumber Rower, so you do see sometimes people running it alongside Ranker Chain if they feel that they don't really want the Black Tear's Husk Dragon out of it. So let's look into the cards a bit further and see which lines we want to go for. So the first one up is going to be the Ranker Chain from the normal line. And Ranker Chain's got the skills of Act Vanguard Circle, once a turn, cost Soul Blast 1, draw 2 cards, choose up to 1 order card from your hand and discard it. If you choose to not discard an order, choose 2 cards from your hand and discard them instead. Then the second skill of Continuous Rearguard Circle. If you played an order this turn, this unit gets power plus 2000. So what we can tell from this card here is obviously we're getting a cycle within our deck from turn 1. Normally Soul Blast 1 to draw 1 would be the usual, but instead in this situation we're getting Soul Blast 1 to draw 2 and ditch 1 to 2 cards. It's helping us in our get-go because obviously we're looking for our orders, which is the key engine of the Zorga deck. But it also helps out further because we can literally get our orders and set up our drop zone instead. So we can discard things like the Roaming Prison Dragon. We can get bits in our drop zone like the Headhunter to bring back out in the later game to reduce our counterblast costs. But you've still got the side of going, you still discard an order, which can then lead into helping out with Black Tear's Husk Dragon. So Black Tear's Husk Dragon's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, choose up to 1 normal order from your drop zone and put it into your hand. Then it's got the second skill of Continuous Rearguard Circle. If you played an order this turn, this unit gets 5000 power. So as the lead-in suggested, you can discard an order from the Ranker Chain to then add it back to hand again with the Black Tear's Husk Dragon on the following turn. Doing this generates the Soul Blast 2 to draw 1, ditch 1 actually to be just a Soul Blast 1, draw 2, which is really solid for the deck. Plus you have got Black Tear's Husk Dragon as an additional attacker if need be, because when he's on the Rearguard Circle he does become a 15k attacker if you've played an order. This isn't restricted to Alchemagic, so if you can't Alchemagic for the turn, this is still a 15k attacker, which is still nice for the deck because some cards do rely on Alchemagic to actually get full power out their uses. Plus this is also an Incept as well, so you're generating a unit. You can generate the unit onto the board, become a 15k attacker, and then Incept it away next turn to make space for other units. But we do have the alternative line, and we'll start off with Awakening from Slumber Roa. So Roa does have the skill of, when its unit is placed on Bioroid Ruth Roa, which is the grade 0 starter, call up to 1 plant token to your back row center rearguard circle. So like with Ranker Chain, this is a plus 1 for really fair cost, this one being free. And it also causes your opponent to guard differently. As normally an 8k into an 8k would create a 15k shield being a no pass. Whereas this time it's 13 versus the 8 and the 15k shield actually becomes a 1 to pass. So it does make them think more, do they want to guard the Vanguard swing? Or do they actually want to put down 20k's worth of shield to make it a no pass? So having that extra bit of aggression from the get-go does actually add up quite nicely. Then we're moving on to the grade 2 for this side, and that is the World 3000 Years Later Roa. So Roa's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on the Vanguard Circle, cost to retire one of your rear guards and call up to 2 plant tokens to Rearguard Circle. So obviously, as I said earlier, this does work nicely in the Ranker Chain version as well as the ride line, but it does require you actually calling down a unit onto your board, which in certain matchups like versus Seraph Snow, it does make you weaker, because obviously you're calling down a unit to set up your turn 2 plays, they imprison it, you then ride to grade 2 and you're actually not getting a skill out of it because you haven't got the rear guards. So it does become a very interesting matchup, but you do have to be careful when you do play it. And how many units you actually drop down, because obviously the more you drop means more they've actually got to try to imprison, but it does then make your hand weaker if they do decide to go for an aggro push. But outside of that, he does still generate 2 bodies, which can be done either via a 10k column or calling out as 2 boosters to make a 3 column swing very strong. But it's got the flexibility there to make it very interesting for the red Zorga line, because it's keeping up with that aggressive playstyle again. But now that we've covered the actual ride line, we are now moving on to Chapter 3, which is all about the key cards. So obviously the key cards you'd expect to see would be your ride line, as we've discussed, your 0, that's the 0, 1, 2, and then whichever Zorga you choose to go with. Any additional copies of your grade 3 boss in your Persona rides. Some people do run 3, some people run 2, some people don't even run Persona rides. This is more looking at the Grave equals Zorga version, because we do get some people that don't run it because they want to just aggro out the gate, win fast, and they'd rather cut the copies of Persona ride for more aggression pieces. The other thing that's a key card in the deck, which is going to cause a very nice discussion here, is the Perfect Guards. Now, we've got 3 different styles of Perfect Guards. We have got the trial deck ones, like Hopeful Maiden Alejandra. We have got the set ones, like Planar Prevent Dragon. And we've got the new ones that came out, the recent trial decks, in the Order Perfect Guards, like Elementaria Sanctitude. So we're going to go into each of the different Perfect Guard styles, discuss them, what they do, and then compare them overall afterwards. So the first one up is the old start deck Perfect Guards, which is the Hopeful Maiden Alejandras. So Alejandra's got the skill of Continuous Sentinel, and the second skill of when this unit is placed on Guardian Circle, you can discard a card from your hand, choose one of your units, and it cannot be hit till the end of that battle. After that, we have got the set Perfect Guards, like Planar Prevent Dragon. With Planar Prevent Dragon having the skill of Continuous Sentinel. And the second skill of Auto, when this unit is placed on Guardian Circle, choose one of your units and it cannot be hit to the end of the battle. Then, if your hand has 2 or more cards, choose a card from your hand and discard it. Then rounding up the Perfect Guards, we do have the promo ones like Elementaria Sanctitude, which are the Order Perfect Guards. Now, Elementaria Sanctitude's got the skills of Continuous Sentinel. It's also got the bonus continuous of you may only have 1 Elementaria Sanctitude in a deck. But then you've got the actual Order ability out of it. And it's got the ability of, if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive, this unit can be played without paying costs. And you can pay this card with cost, discard a card from your hand, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or less. Choose one of your units and it cannot be hit to the end of the battle. Then you can remove this card. So as you can see here, the 3 Perfect Guards all deal with different situations. Alejandra is really nice for the situations of the battle doors, because obviously discarding not being a cost, you can actually put her on the Guardian Circle, put another card on the Guardian Circle, and then not have to guard if the other card's shield value covered the attack. Or if you're playing 2 Alejandras on the Guardian Circle, you only have to discard for 1. Whereas Planar Prevent Dragon strengths more comes into the later game when you've got lower hand. If you've got 1 card or less, or this being your only card, you then don't have to discard to get that Perfect Guard effect. And then Elemental Sanctitude strengths comes in the fact, obviously, against the grade 4 decks, it's a free Perfect Guard. And it also is an order, so it's not actually placed on the Guardian Circle. So those that, it's like Alejandra in the fact that it can bypass the battle door effects. But it also does better than Alejandra in some stances where it says you can't call it at all to Guardian Circle. This then bypasses those as well. It does, however, count as your 1 Blitz order for the turn. So you do have to be careful if you're using Fine Wine of Abolishments. So you do have to play more around it. As for what I'd expect to see in the different versions, I'd expect to see 1 Elementaria Sanctitude in both Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga and Dead Sea Spiritualist Grave equals Zorga. Reasoning behind this even more is the fact of it being an order in Zorga means that we do have, if we do end up having to mill it or discard it in the earlier game, we do have ways to resurrect it back to hand. Then with the other perfect guards, however, I do see Plan or Prevent Dragon being the remaining 3 perfect guards in the Dead Sea Spiritualist Grave equals Zorga. This is more for the fact of you're an aggro deck, you're playing into having the lower hand anyway, because you're more than willing to chuck your hand onto the board. So you'll hit the lower hand cost easier, making the discard, don't have to discard for 1 or less card in hand, a lot easier to hit. As for Mysterious Range Spiritualist Zorga though, I do see it still running 2 copies of Plan or Prevent Dragon, but I do also see 1 copy of Hopeful Maiden Alejandra in the deck. Now this is actually useful for them, because obviously with it not being Soul Blast to activate Zorga's Alchemagic, he doesn't go through the soul as much. Therefore, we can utilise Shadow Cloak even further in the deck to add perfect guards back to hand, and we can choose which ones we need for the situations. Which does mean having the 3 different options really does help in the deck. After the perfect guards, the other key card that we run are triggers. So, normal situations you would see would be 1 over trigger, 4 heal triggers, and then either 7 or 8 in ratios of crits, and then 3 or 4 in ratios of draws or fronts. The 7 to 8 crits to 3 to 4 draws / fronts does come down to player preference again. Some people like the 7 crits 4 draws or fronts, some people like the 8 crits and 3 draws and fronts. It doesn't really make a difference too much in the long run. It does come down to player preference. Just don't go over the 8 criticals, because that is a very much rule within Overdress. We are going to quickly discuss our overtrigger options first. And we've got 2 overtrigger options. First one being in Albaria, and the second one being in Blessed Favour. So we are going to quickly discuss Albaria first. Now, Albaria's got the additional skill of, choose one of your units, and it gets power plus 10 million till end of turn. So this card generates 2 lots of 10 million power. 100 million power, Whereas Blessed Favour's additional effect is draw a card, choose one of your units, it gets critical plus 1, all your front row gets 10,000 power. If your damage zone has the same number of cards as your opponent or more, choose 1 card from your damage zone and heal it. So, yes, Albaria is just a simple 2 lots of 100 million power, whereas Blessed Favour is a draw, crit, front, and heal within its overtrigger effect. Which honestly does a lot more for the deck, so it is going to be the overtrigger choice for any Zorga deck. Then obviously within our 7 or 8 crits, we do run 4 of the effect criticals. Reason behind this is we are very much wanting extra soul, and the ability to slide a crit into soul that we've called from the drop zone to generate the soul, give 2,000 power, does really help the deck out in the long run. More so with the Grave equals Zorga, because he does have the heavier Soul Blast cost due to his effect. As for the difference between draws and fronts, I feel this again comes down to which version of Zorga you're aiming towards. Those that are playing the Grave equals Zorga, which is the more aggressive variant, do usually want to go for the front triggers, due to the fact of it's generating more power on your board, your entire front row is getting that extra aggression out the gate, and being a 20k shield on top does help the defensive side, which obviously you do cut back on a bit to provide into the aggro. Whereas on the Mysterious Range Spiritualist Zorga side, you do want to lean more into the draws, because it's finding your combo pieces, helping you get combo off, and the extra hand advantage does help for the defensive side of it. Then we move on to our heal triggers. So obviously we do have 2 effect heals within the nation. We have got Alchemic Hedgehog, and we have got Syphophilia Fairy Usher. So we're going to cover Alchemic Hedgehog first. Now Alchemic Hedgehog's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on Guardian Circle, If the attacking unit's critical is 2 or greater, and the critical was increased by a non-trigger effect, or its original critical was 2 or greater, this unit gets shield plus 15,000 till the end of that battle. Whereas with Zephyr Fairy Asha, her skill is, when this unit is placed on Guardian Circle, if your opponent's attacking unit has attacked 2 or more times this turn, this unit gets 15,000 shield until the end of that battle. So the big difference you can see from the two here is how they actually gain their 15,000 shield. Alchemic Hedgehog is working around rearguards that gain additional crits, whereas Asha is all about units that are restanding. As for which you would include in your deck, for Grave equals Zorga, it would become a meta dependency. So if you've got your local scene being all restanding rearguards like Bruce, Thegria, not even just rearguards, the Vanguard restand of Thegria this activates on as well. Overlord, just anything that restands a lot, you'd want to go for Asha. Whereas if you're against Gravidias, Zorga, all the additional crit gaining stuff, you'd want to lean to more towards into Alchemic Hedgehog. Whereas with the Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga, like with the Perfect Guards, you can actually get away with running Run of Each heal. This is due to the fact of obviously Shadow Cloak again can bounce back whatever you revived and bounce back to hand depending on the situation. So having the ability to pick and choose in a toolbox deck is very nice to have. Alright, we are now moving on to Chapter 4, and that is tech options. So our tech option splits off into both orders and units, and we're going to discuss the orders first. Orders are then split up further by myself into 3 little subcategories. First one is unit recursion. Second section is for power manipulation. And then the third section is actual resource management. So we're going to start off with Clouded Miasma in the beginning of the unit recursions. So Clouded Miasma's got the skill of Haze with Counterblast 1 to choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop zone and call it to Rearguard Circle. If this is part of Alchemagic, you can choose one of your Vanguards, and then it gets the skill of cost Vanguard, continuous Vanguard Circle. All your front row gets 5,000 power, and they gain that till the end of turn. So this is really nice for the fact obviously you're giving a passive skill to your Vanguard to increase your aggression even further. And if we get the multi-attack in the battle phase come where it calls a unit over another unit, we then get that new unit also gaining the power. So it's a nice little bit of combination with the Grave equals Zorga skill, because it then means a continuous Vanguard Circle, 10,000 power to the front row. Which, leaning into his aggro playstyle, this does go even further. And having the unit recursion from the drop zone to bring back a booster is another bonus bit on top. Next card up on the list is In the Dim Darkness, the Frozen Resentment. This has got the ability of, play this with cost Soul Blast 1, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 card from among them, discard it and shuffle your deck. Then choose a card from your drop zone with a grade less than or equal to your Vanguard and call it to Rearguard Circle. So this is unit recursion again, bring a unit back to board. But this one we get a little bit of selective milling beforehand, so we can actually look for gives us an extra chance to dig for an additional piece that we want in our drop zone. I do want to stress though that any roaming prison dragons milled off of this top 3 will not get to call themselves from the drop zone because they've already missed their point of Alchemagic being seen. Next card up is Regurgitation from the Underworld. So this has got the ability of, play this with cost of Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1, choose one of any player's rearguards and retire it. Then choose up to 1 card with the same grade as that card from your drop zone and call it to Rearguard Circle. If you Alchemagic this card, you may choose up to 2 units to call instead of 1. So obviously this is really nice for double unit recursion if you've Alchemagicked, if not single unit recursion, which is really strong. But we're then getting spot removal on top of that. So we can remove our opponent's weakers down the line. Just that other boosters they want to keep on the board, we're now removing them. And then calling two cards from equal to those grades. It does become restrictive over what your opponent's got, means what you can and can't call. But you can also do the situation of retiring one of your own units to then bring 2 back to board again. So you do have other options around it. You can work with it really nicely. Then next order up is Spiritual Body Condensation. Now, Spiritual Body Condensation's got the skill of play this with cost Soul Blast 1. Choose a card with grade equal to or less than your Vanguard, call it from your drop zone, call it to rearguard circle, and it gets 5,000 power to end the turn. So obviously this is very similar to all the other orders of pay a cost, choose something in your drop zone, call it to rearguard circle. But this one also gives it an extra 5,000 power on it, so it helps with the scaling, which can actually help in a more aggressive deck, because applying more power to the board means it's harder for your opponent to guard. You can force your attacks through a lot easier. Next one up is Whales That Melt in the Sound of Rain. This has got the skill of your opponent chooses one of their rearguards and retires it. You then choose up to 1 card with the same grade as the unit retired by your opponent from your drop zone and call it to rearguard circle. So this order is very similar to Regurgitation from the Underworld, in the fact of you're recurring your unit based on what has been retired. But the problem with this card is it's reliant on what your opponent chooses to retire. So they're in full control, but then to compensate that, they've made this have no cost behind it to try and balance the card out for it, which is really interesting. Then moving on to the final of the unit recursion orders in Wild Intelligence. Wild Intelligence has got the skill of play this with cost of Counterblast 1. Discard 3 cards from the top of your deck. Choose up to 1 card with the same grade as your Vanguard or lower from your drop zone and call it to rearguard circle. If your Vanguard is Silvered Hornbeast King Magnolia, choose up to 2 cards instead of 1. So obviously that second part of the skill will not apply to us because we are not a Magnolia deck, we're a Zorga deck. But the ability to accelerate our drop zone by milling 3 and then calling a unit back from it does create it as another option for the deck. You can aggro mill your stuff in the early game because this is a early game order. To help set up your drop zone, get your Roman Crimson Dragons in there ready to late game full on aggro with the Roman Crimsons and try and win. Next section we're on to now is the power manipulation orders. And we're going to start off with the Blitz order. Find Drink of Abolishment for Sins. So obviously this has got the cost of play this with Soul Blast 1. To then draw a card, choose one of your units, and it gets 5,000 power till the end of that battle for each different order in both your drop zone and your bind zone. So this is really nice on its own for the fact that it's a defensive order to try and help increase the shield power within a deck that's got a lot of orders within it. And the fact that you're gaining an additional draw on top of this means you're replacing Find Drink of Abolishment straight away card advantage wise, which is really nice. Next order up in the power manipulations is Grief, Despair and Rejection. So this has got the cost of play this with cost Count Blast 1. If your Vanguard is Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga, you can choose 3 of your units and they get 10,000 power into the end of their turn. So obviously this is really nice because it adds the aggression route chances into Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. It is obviously heavily restricted, so the Grave equals Zorga cannot use this. But 3 units all on the board gain 10,000 power is really nice to work off of. Next one up is In Search of an Ideal Far Away. This has got the skill of choose one of your units until end of turn it gets the skill of also Vanguard Rearguard Circle. When your other unit attacks, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So this is a commonly used order on turn 1, turn 2 within Zorga decks. For the fact of obviously it activates a early Roman Prison Dragon. And the fact of it being costless also means it can actually even be done turn 1. So really plays into the aggro play style really nicely. And get going swinging dragons with crits from turn 1 onwards. Next order up on the list, and the final one for the power manipulations, is Nectar of Sensationalism. So Nectar of Sensationalism has the ability of choose one of your rear guards until end of turn. It gets power plus 5,000 for each 5 cards in your drop zone. And if you've got 15 or more cards in your drop zone, the unit gets critical plus 1. So this can be seen as a late game win con. Because obviously, hitting the 15 in drop, if you're playing the control versions of Zorga, it does take its time to build up those numbers. Obviously, aggro can use this from the get-go quite early, because obviously they're aggressively digging through their deck, milling cards. You'll get to see this earlier. But having the nice tempo behind it of when you can and can't use it based on the different versions of Zorga you're using is really nice. Plus, it's also got no cost behind it, so if you are starting to run out of resources, this is still a very nice card to have. Talking of resources though, we are now into our resource management orders. And the first one up is Death Inviting Black Magic. This has got the ability of cost of this card is reduced by counterblast 1 for each card in your bind zone, and this obviously is total cost for Alchemagic, so both orders. You can play this with cost of counterblast 4 to then draw 2 cards. So obviously, very hefty cost behind it, because counterblast 4 to draw 2 is a lot, but it then rewards you by reducing that cost the later in the game you're using it. And it's not just cards in orders in bind zone, it's just cards in general. So if you've got units that bind themselves, this cost then becomes even lower as well, helping you try to make the cost more easily manageable. Plus, it's a order that actually is a +1 in the long run, so it does help out overall. Next order up is Gather Upon Me, Ye Wanderling Souls. This has got the skill of pays for the cost, discard an order card from your hand. Choose one of your vanguards and it gets drive +1 till end of turn. So this is in generically -1 order, because you are discarding a card on top of playing this as your order to get 1 additional drive check out of it. But it warrants itself for the fact of the amount of pressure that additional drive check provides. Does also mean that with it not being grade restricted, you can use this as your grade 2 order to provide that extra bit of pressure on turn 2, calling out a Prison Dragon on top, and play a bit more aggressively with it. But it does also require the bit of control, because obviously having the order in hand to discard does require that little extra bit of setup. So it's one of the more technical cards to use, but can work out in the long run. Next order up is Overcoming the Unnatural Death. So this has got the ability of pay this with cost counterblast 1. Bind this card, choose up to 2 order cards from your drop zone, and put them into your hand. So obviously the bind this card, if this is used in Alchemagic, would mean the card you're playing from hand. So this is in your drop, you're binding 2 cards that turn, which does also need setup plays with the Death Inviting Black Magic, because next turn you've got the 2 cards in bind instead of 1. And it's also a nice little bit of order recursion, which is more useful for the Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. But it also does have some benefits for Grave equals Zorga, for the fact of it doesn't specify normal orders, it's any order. So this is one of the ways that we can recur Elementaria Sanctitude from the deck. But this is one of those, I'm controlling my tempo, I'm not going to kill you this turn, but this will set me up for the following turn. So it's a really nice card and very much a tempo-based order. Next order up, which is becoming a very popular one at the moment, is Sweetness is a Bad Dream. You can play this card with cost +1 to then draw a card, look at the top card of your deck, and either put it back on top of your deck or discard it. So this is really nice for the fact, obviously, it's replacing itself instantly with a draw 1, but then you're getting the ability to control your top deck even further by either leaving triggers on top or milling key combo pieces into the drop zone. I do want to stress again, obviously, like with the earlier orders, if this is sent to, if you send a roaming prison to the drop zone via this card's effect, you then don't get to resurrect it because it did not see the Alchemy Magic. And then we move on to our final order in the forms of Tearful Malice. So Tearful Malice has got the skill of play this with cost, retire 2 rearguards. You can then draw a card, put this card into your soul, and then countercharge 1. So this is really nice from the get-go, for the fact of it's obviously replacing itself with the draw 1. You're generating a soul block charge and a countercharge, which is really solid. But because of it being a cost to retire 2 rearguards, you can retire any roaming prison dragons that are currently on the board. And because the cost activates before the Alchemy Magic is seen, the roaming prison dragons can then call themselves back out again. Because they'll then see the Alchemy Magic of the effects and then get to go off. So really nice combos you can work off with this card. But that is all the orders. Let us move on to the next subchapter of the normal units. So I have split these down even further into grades 1s, 2 and 3s. I've not covered every single card that can be included. What I've done is I've looked into those that have been used recently within Zorgas and covering those instead. So starting off the grade 1s, we have the Adhesive Thread Mutant Actia Sticky. Actia Sticky's got the skill of at rearguard circle. Once a turn, you can cost, counterblast 1 and retire 2 other rearguards. Draw a card and this unit gets power plus 5,000 to the end of turn. So this is really nice to the fact that obviously you're retiring units to then draw cards, but this is before order activations. So you can also then Alchemy Magic to bring back the retired Roman Prison Dragons, for example. So just having the extra options to retire the Roman Prison Dragons back into the drop zones instead of just overcalling them gives a nice extra little bit of aggression for the deck and setting up your combos. Plus that extra 5,000 power can help out in the long run due to scaling. Next card up is Carry-On Processing. Carry-On Processing's got the skill of act rearguard circle, can't blast 1 and bind this unit. Choose an order card from your drop zone and put it into your hand. So this is a nice little bit of order recursion within the deck. And it's also putting itself into the bind zone, leading up for future combos with Death Inviting Black Magic. The other thing to note is also, like with the Overcoming the Unnatural Death, this is any order, not normal order. So again, this can add Elementaria Sanctitude back to your hand again. Next card up on the list is a Lively Rhythm Biara. So now Lively Rhythm Biara's got the skill of Auto Rearguard Circle. When the attack this unit boosted hits a Vanguard, cost, put a grade 2 or less card from your hand into your soul to then draw a card. So obviously this is really nice behind the fact of you're generating soul. You can even cycle orders from hand to soul for this to then draw into shield power. So it lets us manipulate our hand a little bit more, help find the extra bit of shield. But it's also then locked behind, it's got to hit the Vanguard. But this can be mitigated further by choosing where to place this. So for example, placing this behind the Vanguard, whereas both your front row rear guards are Roseman Prison Dragons with crits, does lead to the opponent thinking, do I want to take the 2 crit rearguard or do I want to take the Vanguard? So it does lead to more thought process plays and leads to a really nice playstyle. Next grade 1 up is called Performing Pedal Diantha. So Diantha is a grade 1 with the skill of, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle from hand, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can counterblast 1, choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop zone and call it to rearguard circle. The second skill is during your turn, if you have 2 or more grade 1 or less rearguards, this unit gets 5,000 power. So this is really nice for the grave equals Zorga version, as it gives a unit that you can use to try and replicate the skill of Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga, and have a bit more of a tempo playstyle with a bit of control to that deck. It is obviously locked to being behind hand, so if you do wish to abuse it, you do actually have to utilise Shadow Cloak, pressing it back to hand, so it does take more resources in the long run. But the ability to reuse it is there, so it gives it more options for the deck. And the fact of being a nice 13k booster does give extra options alongside the Rogue Headhunters in case you can't find them, to give you a nice big booster for the deck. Next grade 1 up is a Rogue Headhunter. Now Rogue Headhunter's got the skill of, if you played an order this turn, this unit gets 5,000 power. It's also got the second skill of, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, the next time you can Alchemagic, you can reduce the cost of that by counterblast 1. The key thing to note is though, if it has no cost, you do not then get to countercharge off of it. So this is really nice for the fact that it's a 13k booster from the get-go, because it's just tied to playing an order, not just playing an Alchemagic's order. And then you also got the ability of reducing counterblast if you Alchemagic. This becomes more of an issue with the basic Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga, due to his also taking away counterblasts. Not so much of an issue with Grave equals Zorga, due to the fact of there being no counterblast behind him. So numbers in the deck would depend on obviously which Zorga version you're running. Next card up is Sea Breeze Abduction. So Sea Breeze Abduction's got the skill of, also rearguard circle, when the attack this unit boosted hits a Vanguard, you can bind an order card from your drop zone, to choose an order card from your drop, and then put it into your hand. So obviously this is more order recursion, but this is actually setting up your bind zone at the same time, so it can work really nicely with Death Inviting Black Magic. It is obviously, like with Biara, locks behind an on hit on the Vanguard, but as said with Biara, places behind the Vanguard, have two Roman Prison Dragons on the board with crits. It does cause a lot of thought process behind what your opponent does and doesn't want to take. And like with Carrion Processing, this is any order added back to hand, so can add back Elementaria Sanctitude. Next card up on the list is Sleeve Tugging Bell. Now Sleeve Tugging Bell's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you may put all the cards from the bind zone into the drop zone. If you do, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn for each card put into your drop zone. So this helps out for recurring the stuff that you've bound back into your drop to then combo off with your different Alchemagics again. And the 5,000 power on top for every order can actually stack up depending on how long you leave it. So late game, if you're sending 4 orders from bind to drop, she then becomes a 27k booster. You do have to be wary because she is obviously a 7k base. But this obviously can be compensated with the effect of the plus 2k from the effect criticals. So there are ways to mitigate the 1,000 loss in power. And then the final grade 1 to cover is Stepping Calyx Salvia. So Salvia's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you may call a plant token to rearguard circle. So Salvia is really interesting. The fact that she's a free plant token generator. It doesn't matter where she comes from, but she will generate that plant token for free. The only restriction behind her is she's locked to your opponent being grade to your Vanguard being grade 3. So she can't be really used as an aggro piece, more as a tempo, call the token, but then use the token as a resource to pay for costs. So it does add up quite nicely. But that's it for the grade 1s. Let's move on to the grade 2s. And we're going to start off with Atrocious Moth Girl Maple. So Maple's got 2 skills. First one being the auto drop zone. When your grade 3 or greater Vanguard is placed during the ride phase, if you do not have a unit with Maple in its card name, you may call this card a rearguard circle. Obviously, if you've got 2 in the drop, you can only use one of them. Second skill is Thegria locked, so I'm not going to cover it at this point. So what this does for the deck is it's a free recurring unit, just like with Salvia. Like Salvia created a token, this gets to create a free unit, but this one's just can also be used further as it's an intercept. So say you're not going to be able to do a double Roman Prison Dragon, having the ability to call this back from the drop, have it as an attacker that you can then intercept off again next turn, does make really nice. But you've also got, like with Salvia, you can call this and use this as a resource to sacrifice for other stuff to then mitigate your costs a bit better. Next card up on the list is Blooming Petal Caryophyllus. Now, Caryophyllus has got the skill of, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if your soul has no cards, you can soul charge 2. So first thing to note is obviously it is a 9k base grade 2, so scaling does become an issue, but again can be mitigated with the crits that go into soul to give plus 2k. Also, the fact that this can generate a free soul charge 2 does mean it can become a tech option for Grave equals Zorga. Not so much for Mysterious Rain Spiritual Zorga because it doesn't go through its soul as fast. Next card up is Clipping Dragon of Soul Revolution. It's got the skill of, at the end of your turn, if you Alchemagic an order and played it, or attacked a total of 5 or more times this turn, cost, you can put this into your soul and counter charge 1. So this is really nice as an alternative attacker, for the fact of, end of the turn, it removes itself off the board and generates a soul by generating a soul, and gives you a counter charge on top, which is really nice for Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. It's also, with it removing itself off the board, does improve your matchups versus the likes of Gravidia and the other field clearing decks. It is, however, locked behind Alchemagic, so it is a very late game tempo based card, so it's not going to really see a play in the Grave equals Zorga. Next up, we have got Dragritter Girl of Flame Blossoms Radlina. Radlina's got 2 skills. First one being Act Rearguard Circle. If you do not have a Momoke token, you can Count Blast 1 and call 1 to Rearguard Circle. Her second skill is her Glitter Rower locked one, and it's got the skill of Auto Rearguard Circle. When this unit attacks, you can Soul Blast 1, choose one of your token units in the same column as this unit, and this unit gets the power of that unit until the end of the battle. It treats it as the increased values, not the base values. So before we discuss Radlina herself, we are going to quickly cover her Momoke token. Now the Momoke token's got 2 skills as well. First one being, Act Rearguard Circle once a turn, cost retire 1 or more of your other rearguards, and this unit gets 5,000 power until end of turn, for each of the units retired for this cost. And its second skill is the Glitter Rower one, and it's got the ability of Continuous Rearguard Circle. If you have a unit with Radlina in its card name in the same column as that unit, this unit can attack from the back row. So this is very much really useful if you're going for the rower ride line to get the full effects. You can use it for the ability to call the Morocco token, and then the token every turn can sacrifice your Roman Prison Dragons for free and become a 15k booster. So it does have additional options, but you get the full benefits if you're going the Roro ride line, because you then get to have the 4 attacks on turn 2, which is a really solid play. It does give a lot more aggro, so it does work really nicely if you're going for the Grave equals Zorga route. But you can still use it with the Morocco token skill just to have that nice bit of combo-ness with the Mysterious Rainspirator Zorga. This does also work nicely with the likes of Maple. As I was saying earlier, calling it Maple to rear guards, then sacrifice it off for this to make it a 10k booster, does have its uses in the long run. Next card up is Fleet Swallow. Now, Fleet Swallow has got the skill of, when this unit attacks, if you Alchemagic this turn, you can Soul Blast 1 until the end of the battle. This unit gets 5,000 power, and when your opponent would call cards from the hand to Guardian Circle, they must call 2 or more at the same time. So, due to obviously this being an Alchemagic Battledore combo, you ideally want to say this is your as a game ender pretty much. And the Soul Blast 1 can be very, very much of a problem in the Grave equals Zorga, so won't see so much play there. But having it as an option within the combo-based Mysterious Rainspirator Zorga does work out in the long run. Next one up on the list is the Inheritance Maiden Hendrina. So Hendrina's got the skills of, when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, you may discard 3 cards from the top of your deck. Her second skill is then at Rearguard Circle. Cost, retire this unit. Until end of turn, next time you would Alchemagic an order and play it, you may choose not to pay any of the costs Soul Blasts. So this is really nice for the fact that it can speed up your aggro milling by on play to mill 3. And it can help mitigate Soul Blast costs, which can lead to being very useful in the Grave equals Zorga, due to the fact we're already eating Soul up for the fact of his own skill. Next up is Prod Pollen Raphaelis. Now Raphaelis has got the skill of, when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, you can Count Blast 1 and call up to 2 plant tokens to Rearguard Circles. So this is really nice for the fact of obviously it's calling 2 plant tokens to help generate extra aggression within the deck. It is not locked behind a Vanguard grade as well, so it's working very nicely in the early game. But it has got a lower base power, so you do have to be wary. But as I said, with the other cards, the 2k soul crits do help with scaling this back up to a normal base power level. Even just having the crits boost this itself, it's still a 13k column at that point. And then the final grade 2 we have to cover is Shadow Cloak. So Shadow Cloak's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle from a hand, search your deck for up to 1 order card and reveal it. And then if you do not have that named order in your drop zone, discard the revealed card. Then shuffle your deck. And second skill is, when you play an order, you can Soul Blast 1, and this unit gets 5,000 power to the end of turn. If it was an Alchemagic, you can then choose one of your rear guards and return it back to your hand. So this is one of the very, very important options that Zorga has for pieces to use. The fact of you're setting up your drop zone for Alchemagic plays, but also have recursion on top of that in the ability to bounce cards back from field to hand. So you can reutilize different skills that are on place. You can use it to bounce your shield for your defensive plays. The other thing is he can also search your deck for any order, not just normal orders. So he can directly send the Elementaria Sanctitude from deck to drop, and then have other stuff put the Centaurian from drop to hand. So it should give Zorga a searchable perfect card. Moving on to grade 3s, and we've only got one grade 3 to discuss because he's the only one that really sees that play anymore, and that is Roaming Prison Dragon, which we've mentioned a few times throughout this. Roaming Prison Dragon's got one skill in the fact of also drop zone. when you play a normal order, you may call this card to rearguard circle. If you called this card, perform one of the following actions. If it was Alchemagic, you could perform both of them instead. First action is, this unit gets 10,000 power till end of turn. The second action, this unit gets critical +1 until the end of turn. So this is a free recurring grade 3 that calls itself to rearguard every time you play an order. But this isn't also grade restricted, so when they can do it. So if this is in drop zone turn 1, you play a grade 1 order, you can then bring this out and start aggroing with crits from turn 1 onwards. So it does provide a lot of pressure to the deck. And now we're on to the final chapter, which is the example lists. So I want to stress these are 2 beginner-friendly lists that are meant for those picking up Zorga for the first time. And these are not lists you have to follow. You can update them to your own personal preferences. I've just got an example version here of both Blue Zorga and Red Zorga, just to show how they play, and those that want to learn the deck can just pick it up, muck around with it, and then do changes as they want afterwards. So we are starting off on our blackboard with the Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga list. And as you can see from the list here, we've got some of our bits that we've mentioned in our key cards of 2 Plan of Events, 1 Alejandra, and 1 Elementary Sanctuary for our Perfect Guards. We've got our 4 Persona Rides, and we've split our heals up to be a 1 Alchemic Hedgehog, 1 Xenophilia Fairy Asha, and 2 Petronellas, because we've got the ability due to Shadow Cloak to bounce our required heal we want back to hand. We've gone for a grand total of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 orders, including the Sanctitude. So we've got a high chance of actually being able to hit the order off the turn 1 rank chain. And we've still got enough to utilise with Seabreeze Abduction to bind an order to get an order back to hand, and still have Sleeve Tugging Bell to return orders from bind. Because obviously we are the Mysterious Rain Spiritual Zorga, we don't need so many of the Roman Prison Dragons, so we have dropped down to 3. Because we do like to ideally have a Shadow Cloak on board as well to actually have pressure that side. Because what we'd normally do is if we have the Vanguard column, then one side being a Roman Prison Dragon with a Rogue Headhunter booster, and the other side would then be a Shadow Cloak boosted by a Seabreeze Reduction, so all 3 columns have got threats. As you can see here, nice simple list. We've gone for nice simple combo based orders. We've got the Gather Upon Me, we've got the Tearful Malice for reutilising our Roman Prison Dragons, we've got the Sweet Dreams just to stack our top deck, got the 1 copy of Ideal Far Away for if we do decide we want to go for that little bit of early game rush with the Roman Prison Dragon, and the Overcoming the Unnatural Death just to help us set up our Alchemagic plays a lot easier in the deck. And obviously Cloud of Miasma being the main stage to give us that extra 5k power to our board and still getting unit revival on top, which we can then obviously bounce back to hand if we need to with Shadow Cloak. All in all, very simple list and very fun to play around with. Then we're moving on to my other list, which is the Dead Sea Spiritualist Grave Eagle Zorga list. Now this one's a little bit more techy because I've decided I want to go for a few more options. So obviously we've still got the staple bits here of the 3 Plan of Events with 1 Elementary Sanctuary this time, because obviously we're not going to be using Shadow Cloak as much. We've got 4 copies of Grave Eagle Zorga, because we do still want Persona Ride. 4 Roman Prison Dragons this time round. I've still put the 1 of each heal in here because obviously, as I said, the heals don't come down to player preference. So obviously you can take whichever one you don't feel you don't need out for the other one, or put 3 normal heals and 1 of the counter heals. But then we look at the tech options I've added in, and I've added in 2 copies of Biara and 1 copy of Radlina. So I've gone for Radlina in here to go alongside with Tearful Malice for the recursion of our roaming prison dragons back into our drop zone. Plus the fact of obviously having that as an extra 15k booster for grade 2 turn does that. Because it obviously Radlina can still summon the token from turn 2 to give that a big buff and make it a nice big column from turn 2. Helps out the aggro a little bit further. But then obviously the other tech option we've gone for is Biara, just to help filter our shieldless orders into our soul to then draw a card, but it's also filling up soul at the same time that then Zorga can then soul blast them out, bounce them back to hand, or leave them in the drop for the Alchemagic combos. And obviously, as said in the profile, we have gone for front in this version, because obviously this is the more aggro version, so we want to apply pressure to our entire front row, just for that extra little bit of push. Order-wise, we've gone for 2 Clouded Miasmas, 1 Gather Upon Me, 1 Nectar Sensation, just that extra little bit of aggro, 1 Tearful Malice, 2 Sweet Dreams, just because it's a really nice order for this deck. It helps you check your top decks, see how aggro you can be. Got 2 Ideals, because obviously we want to increase that chance of finding it on our turn 1 to have the Roman Prison Dragon combos going off from turn 1 onwards. And just having the 1 Overcome the Unnatural Death, just so the fact of we have still got the Shadow Cloak Milling Sanctitude and this added back to hand for that searching for the PG within the deck. But that is going to be it for today's lecture. If you haven't done so already, please do like and subscribe. These do take a lot of time and effort to create, and I do really appreciate the support. If you do have any questions about today's class, please do leave them in the comments below. I will get to them as soon as I can. And I will catch you guys in the next lesson. Bye bye!